Hello, and welcome to the Inner Manage channel. My name is Dr. Gyesie, founder of Inner Manage Coaching, and today we're going to be delving into a topic that many of you might find not only intellectually stimulating, but also personally transformative, and that's the roots of narcissism. What's the origin of narcissism? How are narcissists created? Can they heal? And what does this mean if you're an empath who's ever experienced narcissistic abuse? We'll explore how narcissists come into being, how their condition is perpetuated across generations, and the crucial contrast between the narcissist path and the empath's path. We'll also talk about how narcissists can help themselves break free from their cycle of behavior should they choose to. It's not the job of the empath to heal the narcissist, and more often than not, narcissists are incapable of healing unless they desire to do so on their own. If you've ever wondered why you or someone close to you seems caught in this dynamic, stay tuned, because what we may uncover might be life-changing. So now let's get to the making of a narcissist. How is a narcissist made? Well, to start, narcissists are made. They aren't born that way. At the core of narcissistic personality disorder is a childhood experience marked by trauma. Specifically emotional neglect, abandonment, or extreme overvaluation. Many people think of narcissists as having an inflated sense of self from birth. Not true. Research shows that narcissistic personality disorder, NPD, is largely a learned response to early childhood conditions. One of the most critical elements here is emotional neglect. So when a child grows up without emotional attunement from their caregivers, whether it's due to physical absence, emotional unavailability, or outright emotional abuse, they learn to compensate for that lack of nurturing by constructing a grandiose self-image. And this grandiose self is a defense mechanism designed to protect the child from the deep sense of worthlessness or inadequacy they feel. It's a fragile construct built on external validation, and that's why the narcissists often need constant admiration because they are filling a void that was created in childhood. Generational trauma is key in understanding why the cycle continues, you see. The groundbreaking work of Dr. Gabor Mate and Dr. Rachel Yehuda, pioneers in trauma research, suggest that the effects of trauma, particularly emotional trauma, are passed down from one generation to the next. In other words, narcissism or narcissistic personality disorder is a generational cycle, a generational curse, inherited from parents who got it from grandparents, who got it from great-grandparents, and on and on and on, up to 7 generations. And so we know trauma is passed on between 7 and 14 generations, and there's a study by the National Institute of Health that actually shows that happens. And trauma is passed on not only through what's observed in the environment, but it also passed through the DNA through a process called epigenetics. You see, so imagine a grandparent who survived the war, grew up in extreme poverty. Such a person may have been emotionally unavailable to their children. In turn, those children become emotionally stunted themselves, unable to provide the nurturing that their own children need. And thus the trauma is passed down like a psychological inheritance. Or a child who grows up with relatives and is passed on from one relative to the other develops no emotional stability, therefore this narcissistic sense of grandiosity to deal with the emotional stunted growth that they have. Now, I want to add some data here, because often when you hear about narcissism, it sounds like we're making up the terminology, or it's a terminology that's fashionable these days and everyone's talking about it. But according to a 2020 study by the American Journal of Psychiatry, 62% of individuals diagnosed with NPD, narcissistic personality disorder, reported significant emotional neglect or abuse in early years. 62%. This study shows the profound connection between unresolved trauma and narcissistic tendencies in adulthood. And emotional deprivation not only shapes an individual's personality, but also becomes embedded in the family system as a form of generational trauma. And again, Dr. Gabor Mate, if you haven't read his book, The Myth of Normal, I suggest that you check it out. It says that trauma is not what happens to you. It's what happens inside you as a result of what happened to you. I'll say that again. Trauma is not what happens to you. It's what happens inside you as a result of what happened to you. This distinction is critical when understanding how narcissism forms. A child may grow up in an environment that on the surface seems stable or loving, but if a child's emotional needs are not met, the internal landscape becomes a breeding ground for narcissistic traits. So here I want to talk a little bit about NPD, narcissistic personality disorder, as a generational cycle and a spiritual curse even. So beyond the psychological, narcissism has a spiritual dimension that we must address. See, narcissism isn't just about a psychological condition, it's a spiritual curse, an energetic inheritance that detaches the individual from their true self, from their soul. And in many spiritual traditions, unresolved trauma is seen as a block to spiritual growth. And in the case of narcissism, this block can be so severe that it severs, it cuts off the individual from the essence of who they are. So for example, in Buddhism, unresolved karma from past lives can manifest as emotional patterns in future lives until those patterns are resolved. It's all about balance. In Hinduism, for example, the concept of samsara refers to the imprints left on the soul by past experiences, creating cycles of suffering that continue unless healed. For narcissists, the curse is a kind of spiritual disconnection, where they're so divorced from their true selves that they can't access the emotions and connections that lead to compassion, empathy, and genuine love. This spiritual curse operates through the mechanism of ego defense. And ego defense. And psychologists like Otto Kernberg have described narcissism as a form of splitting, where the narcissist separates their real vulnerable self from the false idealized self. The real self, the part that experiences pain, rejection, and trauma, gets buried deep within, while the false self becomes the mask they wear to the world. And over time, that mask becomes a prison. So spiritual healers and experts like Dr. Sandaknin, who has extensively researched narcissism, describes this as an existential crisis. Narcissists are caught in a form of spiritual numbness, where they can't access higher states of consciousness or deep emotional resonance because their entire psychological architecture is based on avoiding pain. So, neuroscientific studies show that narcissists have a lower activity in brain regions related to empathy, like the anterior, insular, or the right supramarginal gyrus. This reduced neural activity makes it difficult for them to connect with the emotional states of others, further perpetuating this sort of spiritual disconnection. Now, this curse is generational, much like psychological trauma, which we discussed earlier. It isn't just passed down biologically, but spiritually through the family system. A narcissistic parent, because they are emotionally disconnected, cannot teach their children how to connect authentically with their own emotions or the emotions of others. And this lack of connection, in essence, a spiritual inheritance, is passed down like a spiritual family curse. And the narcissist is thus doubly cursed. They carry the emotional scars of their family's unresolved trauma and the spiritual disconnect that comes from never fully facing or healing that trauma. This is why narcissists need a lot of empathy, particularly if you've gone through narcissistic abuse and overcome it. And as painful and as unfortunate and as abusive as it was, when you've come on the other side as an empath and you look back on your journey in retrospect, you begin to really feel empathy. But this is not the empathy that should drive you to want to save the narcissist or fall into the trap of wanting to help the narcissist. It just brings comprehension and empathy rather than scorn and hate because you feel the need to revenge what was done to you. You see? So, how does the cycle of trauma continue? Narcissists, because of their inability to connect with their own emotions, often perpetrate environments of emotional neglect or abuse, whether they intend to or not. In fact, it's noted that narcissistic parents often use their own children as mirrors to reflect their idealized self-image rather than as individuals with their own needs and emotions. Or for example, my child is such a genius in school because I'm an amazing parent, right? Something like that. In such environments, the children either become very overvalued, right, turning into golden children or the golden child archetype, who believe they are the center of the universe, or conversely, devalued, becoming scapegoats who absorb the family's unresolved issues and emotional pain. So the scapegoat is typically the empath, because the empath can feel, sense, and see, whereas the golden child becomes the child the narcissistic parent has chosen to carry the curse of narcissism unwittingly, right? So again, the Journal of Child Development says children of narcissistic parents are at a 50% higher risk of developing personality disorders or mental health issues compared to children from emotionally healthy homes. I'll say it again. Children of narcissistic parents are at a 50% higher risk of developing personality disorders or mental health issues compared to children from emotionally healthy homes. This points to the long-lasting impact of narcissistic parenting on the emotional and psychological well-being of the next generation. And the children of narcissists often grow up with this distorted self-perception. The golden child may develop their own narcissistic tendencies, while the scapegoat may suffer from low self-esteem, anxiety, or depression. Either way, the trauma is passed down, and unless someone in the family system awakens to the cycle, empath, it continues. And this is really the magic of the empath, because the empath is the only one who's able to wake up and say, hey, what's going on here? Let's stop this, right? Now, I want to talk a little bit about the empath's journey in contrast to the narcissist. You see, the empath is often the polar opposite of the narcissist in terms of emotional resonance. Empaths are individuals who not only feel their own emotion deeply, but are also very highly sensitive to the emotions of others. And according to, let me make a reference, Dr. Judith Orloff, who wrote a book on empaths. Empaths have an enhanced ability to absorb emotional energy from those around them, which can be both a gift and a burden. And what's fascinating is that empaths and narcissists are often drawn to each other. Not especially the unhealed empath, right? Narcissists seek the emotional energy they lack, while empaths are often unconsciously attracted to the narcissist's wounded energy. Because that wounded energy makes the empath feel like you can save the narcissist. And this dynamic creates sort of a toxic cycle. If you've ever been in a narcissistic relationship or friendship or marriage or family system, this is not strange to you. And this toxic cycle can also be a catalyst for spiritual awakening for the empath. Again, writer Joseph Campbell's Hero's Journey offers a very powerful framework for understanding the empath's path. Like the hero, the empath is often thrust into the world of suffering, usually through relationships with narcissists. And the empath, unlike the narcissist, doesn't build defenses to avoid pain. Instead, they feel it deeply and use that pain as fuel for growth. In the narcissist-empath dynamic, the empath often goes through what spiritual teachers refer to as the dark night of the soul. The dark night of the soul. And you find this in Joseph Campbell's work. Now, in this zone, empaths experience deep emotional and spiritual challenges. But this suffering is what eventually leads to awakening. This suffering is what leads to eventual awakening. Empaths are often the ones who break the cycle of generational trauma, not only for themselves, but for the entire family system. So, if you've heard the term HSP, or highly sensitive person, which is also an empath, research on highly sensitive people or persons show that the empaths have heightened activity in the mirror neuron system, which is responsible for emotional resonance and empathy. This is why one reason why empaths can feel other people's emotions so intensely is because they are biologically wired for it. The empath's journey is one of integration and healing. Unlike the narcissist who avoids their inner wounds, the empath confronts them head on. This makes the empath's journey a healing path, not just for themselves, but for the collective, whether it's a family system or what have you. In fact, many spiritual teachers believe that empaths are often born into narcissistic families for a reason. And the reason is to transmute and heal the generational trauma that has plagued that family for generations. In this way, the empath becomes the hero of their own story. So it's really a very painful journey, I must say. Very, very, very difficult journey, but a journey that has great rewards. And it's a difficult journey, which is why many before the one who broke the cycle didn't go on that journey. Because it takes courage, insight, fortitude, and a little bit of innocence to actually say, I can break the cycle. Or realize you've been chosen to break the cycle. So, can narcissists heal? As we come to the conclusion of this video, the answer is yes, but with significant effort. Healing for a narcissist requires deep introspection, vulnerability, and a willingness to confront the very trauma they've spent their lives avoiding. And certainly traditional therapies like cognitive-based therapy, dialectical behavior therapy, internal family systems, and others have shown promise in treating narcissistic personality traits. However, narcissists must first develop self-awareness and self-compassion. They must first learn to love and accept the vulnerable parts of themselves that they've long denied. And this process is incredibly difficult because narcissists have an entire identity around their defense mechanism. And for healing to occur, there often needs to be a narcissistic collapse, a moment where the grandiose self-image crumbles, typically when the narcissist has engaged with an empath they underestimated, a Hioka empath. Huh? And this self-image is often triggered by significant loss such as a career failure, divorce, etc. Now, spiritual practices like mindfulness and meditation have also shown promise in helping narcissists heal. In fact, a 2021 study in Frontiers in Psychology found that mindfulness-based interventions like MBSR, mindfulness-based stress relief, and others help reduce narcissistic traits by fostering present moment awareness and emotional regulation. Now, I just want to be realistic here that while healing is possible, less than 30% of individuals with NPD, narcissistic personality disorder, actively seek treatment, according to the Journal of Personality Disorders. This is a 2020 study. Narcissists often don't recognize their own conditions, and when they do, the shame and vulnerability required to face it can be overwhelming, too overwhelming. So as we come to the end of this video, and in closing, narcissism and empathy represent two sides of the same coin, one driven by emotional disconnection, the other driven by emotional connection or resonance. And while narcissists are trapped in a cycle of pain and trauma, empaths are called to heal that pain, not just in themselves, but for the entire lineage or a collective. For those of you who identify with the Empaths Journey, you have a powerful opportunity to break the cycle of generational trauma and step into your role as a healer or light worker. And for those who see themselves or someone they love in the description of a narcissist, know that healing is possible, but it requires a willingness to face the deepest wounds. If you're ready to take the next step in your healing journey, whether as an empath or someone struggling with narcissistic tendencies, I encourage you to reach out to us at Inner Coaching. Our programs are designed to help you break free from the cycle of pain and trauma, whether it's one-on-one coaching or courses or master classes. And these are designed to connect you to your true purpose and help you become the person you are always meant to be. Thank you for joining me today. Stay mindful and aware, and remember, healing is possible for everyone, even those caught in the deepest cycles of pain. Remember, there's no one like you. Peace.